So again, I said we're using a curriculum which I really, really adore, and it's really to make it easy for our kids to kind of connect and our families to connect with the scriptures. And so today's is Holy Confrontation. And so I think the hard lesson that we learn as we get older, if we're not living in denial, is that we understand that we learn the most when something is difficult. Can you get a yes on that? Like, we learn things in beautiful ways too, but I think the things that happen that hit us the deepest, where we learn the most, where we're challenged the most, is when we're confronted with something, when something difficult happens. What I like to say is, Martin Luther King said, the arc of the moral universe bends towards justice, right? Have you heard that? And I always add, and sometimes we have to knock it around a little, right? Sometimes you gotta hit a little to help it bend. Because the world is a place where it's so easy just to keep going in the status quo. It's just so much easier. But we see in these two stories today what it means to challenge the status quo and what it means to learn something new and to change the world. And so think about the times you've learned the most. Like, think in your head. I was thinking in my head this week of one of the lessons I learned, which wasn't an easy one. And so I'll tell you my story. When I was in college, probably towards the third year of college, I went to UC Santa Cruz. Go banana slugs. No other banana slugs in the house? Okay. The fighting banana, no, they weren't the fighting banana slugs. It was just the banana slugs. And we didn't have a football team. That's also true. But anyway, we had a lot of Birkenstocks. But I was involved in the InterVarsity, and I spent a summer in the inner city of Oakland, which I still to this day is probably fairly a divided city. We stayed in the part that was a white flight area, so there was a predominantly black families living there. We were at a church. I'd never had a female pastor at a church before, and she was amazing. And we worked at this church. We worked in a tough and difficult neighborhood, and actually what we did was we ran a school program in the summer for like 2 months for underprivileged kids at their school, right? So we went to their school, we would bring them also to the church, and we would do different programs, and sort of like VBS, right? But for less religious, right? VBS. And so when we were working there, and I got there at the beginning, and of course for me, I was already struggling a bit because it was getting towards the end of my college experience, and I was like, what am I doing with my life? Where am I going after this, right? So of course, in those moments of lack of clarity, you should do something difficult. Maybe not, I don't know. But it was a difficult thing for me. And so we did their summer enrichment program, and I was struggling, and this was all new to me. I'd never lived outside of the confines of the suburban area outside of LA where I come from, Arcadia, and I'd never lived outside of the confines of the safety of a college area. And so there were lots of situations and sounds and things that were very difficult for me, and I was again in this existential crisis of who I'm gonna be. But in the first week, we prevailed. We kind of went on, and we did the week, and I don't remember a whole lot of it, but I do remember that one of our supervisors, who supervised different sites, and so we didn't see her on site every day, her name was Jill, and I love this always, she married Gilles. So it was Jill and Gilles. They're still married to this day. I'm still not, but anyway. Before people had cell phones, it was always fun to call their house. Who do you want? Jill. And you make it funny. Anyway, we don't know who you're calling for. But she came in and she looked at the program and looked at what we were doing and kind of was there for the last day. And then she, of course, did what good program directors do, is she got curious. And she was like, how's everything going? And of course, I did what every 20, 21-year-old did at the time. I was fine, right? I thought you'd all say it. I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine. It's okay. I said, she goes, everything is going well? And I said, I think everything's going really well. And then she said this, very kindly, and I remember it harsher, but it's probably more kind. She says, well, then you need to tell your face and tell your attitude. And I was like, what? Ouch. I mean, I'm Miss Smiley, right? Like, I was like, what is happening? And she said that we were truly giving off the we don't want to be here vibes. And I think it's because I was internally struggling so much. And as you know, I actually don't have a very good poker face, so don't make me lie about anything, because I am terrible at it. I have a very bad poker face. But apparently those were the vibes I was giving off, and the kids were feeling it, right? Here are these kids who are already struggling, And here is this woman coming in, or me, a young adult, and I think I'm doing a good job, but I actually, when you kind of watched me, I was actually kind of alienating the kids. I kind of seemed like I didn't really want to be there. And what is our first response to that? But, right? Or I, like all the excuses. And I think it was the first time I felt like an adult, and I kind of just went, okay, I need to hear this. I need to sit with this for a minute and hear this. And I let the words wash over me rather than defend myself. I really kind of tried to look at it through the eyes of the kids, and I tried to see a different perspective. And I had to, realize that she was right. We don't like that, do we? When hard things are right, you're like, no, I'm perfect, right? No, it turns out I'm not. The kids actually needed me to be there for them. Whatever I was feeling, whatever was going on, it didn't matter to them where I was going to be in 3 months, right? They needed me to be there for them. And so I put aside my bad attitude, my self-loathing, my woe is me. She was so mean to us. And I did better next week. And it turned out to be an amazing summer. It's still partly the reason I'm so passionate about anti-racism work and what we need to do as a church, and also partly why I vote in many ways the way I do. And I think of those kids. I think of those kids and where they are now. I'm glad that I tried to at least become a better version of myself. I think it was one they deserved and needed. And I think so many of us maybe avoid those conflicts, avoid those hard moments. And I get it, I really do. I don't love confrontation. I don't think anyone does. It's hard and upsetting. It can be challenging and demoralizing. But without it, we will often just keep doing the same things over and over and over again, right? What is the actual definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting what? A magically different result, right? And so last week we talked a little bit about leveling up from the prophetic cycles and also from the book that we're doing on Sunday and on Tuesdays. This idea of prophetic disruption, these cycles we get into that we need to be disrupted of. And that really kind of boils down today to confrontation, these hard moments that fuel our growth. I think these moments are the fuel for our transformation. And without it, we stay the same, right? Without it, we stay the same. I hope, I was talking with someone on coffee this week and who wasn't here a few years ago, and we did the sermon series, You're Wrong About, right? Which is my favorite podcast. And I think it's really healthy every now and then to ask yourself, what have I been wrong about, right? If I have the same exact beliefs I did when I was 5, something has gone terribly wrong. Not that we can't have the same joys or the same love or whatever, but hopefully I've expanded my understanding of the world and of situations, right? Staying safe isn't helpful for the religious life. Growing into a more Christ-like version of ourselves is the point, and it sometimes comes through holy confrontation. And so we have 2 stories of 2 women, and you did a very good job, Byron, of delineating out those names. I know they're not easy. I know that every time we have a reader come up and there's a lot of names, they kind of look at me with scorn, like, "Ma, what'd you do to me?" But you did a great job. So first we have the bold story, and I'm going to say of the daughters of Z. How about that? Can everyone agree we can just say the daughters of Z? Good. Notice all their names end with AH, like Noah, right? That denotes that they are a family of faith, a family that is part of the Jewish faith and also very faithful. These women were living in a time, again, when property was not passed down to women. And sometimes they were living in a time where women were property, right? In an interesting time. And so they could have just heard it and understood and known that they wouldn't get land, right? They could have just said, our only sons and men's inherit. I guess we're out of luck. Why? Because that's the way it's always been done, right? I love that. Everyone got that. That was good. Ooh. You see, that's how it's always been done, is what we say whenever progress is facing us and we're a little afraid. And not that we should do progress for progress' sake only, but there's times where we do need to move forward because it won't be done a new way until someone challenges the old way, right? If something is unfair or unjust, we're not going to make it better by sitting back and just letting it go and going with the flow. And these women would refuse to be shrunk away, refuse to be erased. They mattered and they spoke up. And now we have the story of the Canaanite woman, or in Mark's gospel, the Phoenician woman. Both are meant to speak of course, to her otherness, her outsiderness. And you've probably heard this story a little bit more, maybe. I mean, not a lot of people preach on Jesus calling people dogs, but here we are, right? She boldly comes to Jesus, calls him rabbi, calls out his lineage of David. There's a lot going on here, but I think the most important thing is to address why Jesus is so rude and dismissive to her. Did you find that true? Jesus seemed kind of rude and dismissive to her. And I think a way to kind of help us understand that is that there's something going on in this story for us. There's something that's going on that we're supposed to learn. And I think one of the things is we're supposed to understand the ancient rabbinical practice of the 3-time rejection rule. Does anyone know what that is? If you ever try, so no one here has tried to be Jewish. I mean, it's a great thing, I hope, yeah. So I first encountered this, and this is an unfortunate context, but I'm gonna have to give it to you because this is where I first encountered it, on a Sex and the City episode. The original version. You guys remember Charlotte York dated and got engaged to a Jewish guy, and she wanted to become Jewish, right? And so sweet, sweet Charlotte York, she goes up to the rabbi, knocks on the door. I actually watched the scene last night because it was one of my favorites. She knocks on the door because she's used to getting whatever she wants, and she's cute and adorable and sweet and whatever. And so, I'm Charlotte York, and I'm here interested to become Jewish faith. And he goes, we're not interested, and shoves the door in her face. You guys remember that? Yeah. He's super rude to her. She knocks again, and then someone else answers, and she goes, so you need to talk about that guy that was rude. I'm here, and I want it. And he goes, nope, I don't want money, and he knocks the door. And so eventually, of course, she gets in, and she becomes Jewish. But it takes a little bit of effort. And what you need to know about that is that sometimes, not so much in the modern world necessarily, sometimes yes, but in the ancient world in particular, rabbis followed the Talmudic understanding of the stories of faith that brought about this sort of 3-time rejection rule. They basically are testing whether or not you're serious. Because if you come once, yeah, it might be interesting for a moment, but are you really serious? We got to push you a little, right? And I think the church today can't really relate to that, because if someone comes here and wants to become a member, I'm like, yes, please. But that's really not how the rabbis worked and how the ancient world worked, right? Do you really want? And so what he's saying is, you're here for a blessing. You want me to do something for you. Are you serious? Really, that's how he could, in today's lingo, he'd be like, are you serious? Are you serious? This is what you really want. And so I want you to kind of go unpack it with you then, right? She comes and asks Jesus to save her daughter, and what does Jesus do? He ignores her, which is basically no. In front of her, the disciples, this is all happening in front of her. The disciples are basically like, she's irritating, get rid of her, Jesus. It's too much for us. And Jesus says, I'm not here to save her anyway. And then, thirdly, she begs again. She begs, please, please, please. He calls her a dog, which was supposed to evoke kind of the otherness, the contempt the disciples would have felt and the readers would have felt. And then she responds, classically saying, so to you Jewish people, dogs are dirty. To us, they're not. That's great. Whatever you gotta call me to do what you gotta do. And then what does he say? He says, your faith has saved you. Your great faith, and it has been done. She gets what she wants. She gets her daughter saved. And this pattern for us is supposed to, again, mirror the Talmudic tradition, the tradition of intense conversion or intense pleading or intense blessing. 3 rejections followed by a final desperate flee, and the last one that's successful. And this is modeling a conversion story, right? A woman asking to be a part of the larger story of God and succeeding because she's tenacious, right? Because you've always wondered, why on the 3rd time does he flip so much? He's flippant, and then he goes, you have great faith. And it's because he is trying her. He's putting her through the trial to figure out if she really wants this thing done for him. And so our stories today are about the tenacity of women, which is fitting since this is Women's History Month, and today is International Women's Day. And I think we also in this moment need to talk a little bit about why there hasn't been as much progress in the church as there could be for women in leadership. There's history behind it, and I'm going to give you a little history of it. Many of us, we don't read the King James Bible, but many people do, and many people swear by the King James Bible, and some of our theology comes from it, different texts kind of coming out of it. The King James Bible was commissioned in the 17th century, and it was a really impactful thing in the church. It was written not long after King James wrote his philosophical dissertation on witchcraft, entitled, okay, I thought you knew it, just kidding. Demonology, spelled D-E-A-E-M-O-N-O-L-O-G-I, demonology. His views at the time were that witchcraft was evil, and not only was witchcraft evil, but it was treason against God, the worst thing you could do. Who perpetrates witchcraft, do you think? Men? Women. Women, right? He wrote after having a personal involvement in one of the witch trials in North Berwick in 1590. And we know these witchcraft trials were like so many. They're not about magic or sorcery. They're not about the things we think they're about. So you understand that even the witch trials in our country, right, Salem witch trials, were not about witchcraft. We're not about women being witches. Like, we understand that, right? We ever have a conversation afterwards if you think that's true. That's not what it was about, right? It was about land grabs. It was about women owning things. It was about women being too uppity, being too this, being too that, and the people that colluded with them to get things that they needed. It's false claims, it's personal disagreements, it's grudges being deified into the church, finding Satan wherever we can. And we still have it today, right? We call it the satanic panic. We scapegoat people in our effort to keep ourselves from being uncomfortable about progress, right? And so here we are in this moment where we have inherited a little bit of this suspectful, this icky sort of history in our theology, right? In some ways, it's no wonder that our Christian heritage was rooted a bit in misogyny, hatred of women, the destruction of anything non-male. And what's interesting is if you go back and you see the scriptures, like the Canaanite woman, like Z's daughters, right? You see that scripture actually is full of women doing empowering things and God or Jesus going, yes. And so how do we get to a place where some people think women can't be leaders, some people think LGBTQ folks can't be leaders? Like, that is not in scripture. But I wanted to give St. Matthew our flowers. Does everyone know what that means? Give us our flowers, give us our kudos, give us our goodness, right? And so I had Danny look this up this week. Did you know when we had our first council president that was a woman? Does anyone know? 1976. 1976, right? Her name was Anne Kaltofan. Does anyone know if I'm saying that right? Does anyone here recognize her? Maybe Marilyn will tell us if she watches online. Kaltofan. Thank you, Wendy. I love that. Today, our council president is Roseanne. She's a woman, from what I know. Yeah. In 2024, it was Dawn Schubert. In 2023, it was Kenna Anderson. In 2022, when I was hired, it was Annette English. In 2021, it was Mary Henderson. In 2020, it was Dorothy Peterson. In 2017, it was Lee Staton. God rest her. What? But then we have in-betweens, right? So Lee Staton was 2017. Again, may her memory be a blessing. Dawn Schubert was 2014. Twice. Thank you, Dawn. We see you. Diane Mook, may her memory be a blessing, was 2006. Carol Honeywell was 2001. Kathy Squara, who I know is still involved far away with us, was in 2000. Marge Hall was in 1997. I know she's watching. Sue Erickson was 1995. Cheryl Samison was 1994. Carol Honeywell, again, a twofer. We should start giving jackets like on SNL. Twofer. 1983, Joan Davis was 1980. Mary Taylor was 1979. And then, of course, we have Anne in 1976. And so you see, we have a wonderful heritage of lifting up women leaders and the voices of women. And I think that is beautiful. And I also imagine that that's not how it was always done, right? I don't imagine that Anne, when she was the first female council president, I don't imagine 100% of the people were so excited. I mean, I don't know, I wasn't there. But I imagine there were some grumblings. Maybe you didn't hear about them, but there were probably a little bit of grumblings. But it doesn't matter if there's grumblings. It doesn't matter that some people need to be kind of, dragged along in progress. What matters is that we stand up for progress that is just and equitable and good for all of us. And as we know, women in charge are good for all of us. And so just a reminder on this day of Holy Confrontation that it is such a beautiful blessing to be at a church that persisted and resisted and flourishes in that. And so I'm so grateful for the heritage and the lineage of this church. And I hope that we continue to lift up the voices of women in this place. So may we kind of learn the lesson of the former, not only biblical stories we've heard of people challenging the status quo, but may we continue to be people who challenge the status quo for the better. Amen.